new series of Star Wars reviews leading up to Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker at the end of the year. In case any of you are new to my channel, I've already done reviews of the original trilogy, and I may or may not do a video on the prequels. I decided to talk about the newer films, the latest films from Disney and Lucasfilm that have come out from 2015 up until the present day. And I've already done a review of this back when it came out, but having some time to process it, I decided none other than to go more in depth with Star Wars The Force Awakens. Not only my favorite of the newer Star Wars films, but my favorite Star Wars movie next to Return of the Jedi.
What?
Yeah, it's my favorite Star Wars movie, besides one of the original films.
What the hell is the matter with you?
Nothing, it's just my favorite. Now, I am well aware that a lot of people out there don't like this movie or they hate it. And I'm not gonna go into too much detail about what my thoughts are on the dislikes of this movie and how many people think that this is just a remake of A New Hope. I'll address some of those complaints, not detail by detail, because if I do, this video is gonna be 5 hours long and I just don't have time for that. But let's talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens, with spoilers if you haven't seen this by now. It's been 4 years, and you've had plenty of time since then. Let's talk about it, shall we? Those of you who are new to my channel, Star Wars has been very important to me since I was 6 years old. Probably almost tied, or almost even more important than Spider-Man has been to me, as far as fictional story and characters and so on. But when Disney announced that they had bought Lucasfilm for $4.5 billion from George Lucas, 4.5 billion, my God. And when they announced that they were making another Star Wars movie, I was just stoked. I was ready. I was so excited at the possibility of seeing another Star Wars film. I thought that we weren't going to see another Star Wars movie until I was like 40 or 50 years old, until George Lucas passed away eventually. Not that I wish death on George Lucas, I respect the guy, but you get what I mean. And if you've been following my channel for a long time, I was responding and reacting to every single Star Wars Force Awakens trailer that they had put out. Maybe not every single one, there probably was a couple that I missed here and there. I'll tell you, the hype train that I was riding on, oh, I miss that excitement. I miss that joy. From that shot of Finn jumping up on screen in the Stormtrooper outfit, seeing the Millennium Falcon fly at the very end of that first teaser, and then to the reveal of Han Solo saying,
Chewie, we're home.
Up until that time, I hadn't been excited for any kind of movie, probably since The Dark Knight Rises. And when I saw it on opening day, I was so happy that it was as good as it was.
Joe, news for you. It's not really that good because it's a remake of A New Hope.
I'm getting to that. Just hold on, okay?
No, you listen to us.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
This movie stars, well, just about everybody. The new faces, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Adam Driver, and a few familiar faces I'm sure you know. I don't really know where exactly to begin with The Force Awakens, but first off, this movie I saw 5 times in the theater. 5 times. The most I've ever seen a movie in a theater ever. And I thought Avengers Endgame was gonna come close to that. The Force Awakens was by far the best cinematic experience I have ever had in my life. From the first reactions of the people in the crowd to the Falcon showing up, Han Solo's entrance, it was everything that I wanted it to be. And also everything that I never knew that I wanted it to be. And by no means is it a perfect film because, well, let's face it, no movie ever is perfect. There are some things that I think they could have worked out a bit differently, and maybe certain things that I thought, well, that doesn't really need to be in there, but on the other hand, I get why they put it in there. Let's start off with the opening, the classic opening crawl. The fact that there was no logo for 20th Century Fox in the opening of this movie, that just was quite a shock because we were all so used to it by then. And then John Williams' music starts exploding, and then you see the da 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 da. Oh, it was so great. And the first thing you see under the title, Luke Skywalker has vanished, and immediately I was locked in. And it sums up that Luke Skywalker's disappeared, and in his absence, the First Order has risen from the ashes of the Empire. And this takes place about 30 years or so after the Return of the Jedi, and a new villain, Kylo Ren, has showed up on the scene, and is basically, in some ways, the new Darth Vader of this new trilogy and of this new empire. And Poe Dameron, a pilot in the Resistance, is on a secret mission to find a map to Luke Skywalker, which therefore they can find him and bring it back in order to get his help to fight the First Order. So the movie opens up with a large force of First Order stormtroopers storming a village on Jakku, looking for the map to Luke Skywalker. Poe Dameron, who's there meeting up with Lor San Tekka, played by Max von Sydow, acquires the map and unsuccessfully tries to escape with BB-8. So therefore, he takes a piece of the map, puts it in BB-8, and tells him to get as far away as he can, but is later captured by the First Order after Kylo Ren murders Lor San Tekka. The opening scene, it continues the tradition that Star Wars films have had. It demonstrates the power of the villain in the first few minutes of the movie, from the original trilogy to the prequels, and to this movie, it continues that trend. And not only that, but that sequence also introduces us to one of our new characters, FN-2187, or Finn as he's called later on in the movie, when he witnesses the death of one of his comrades in the heat of battle. I love the intro to this character. Even though he's wearing a mask, it's very similar to Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi when Luke is being electrocuted. You can tell what's going on inside of his head as he's witnessing all this horror and tragedy happening all around him. And you can hear the heavy, nervous breathing from Finn. It's muted out, kind of like Saving Private Ryan. No words spoken. You know exactly what's going on inside this guy's head, and he does not fire his weapon when Captain Phasma orders all the soldiers to open fire on the villagers. And the little look that he and Kylo Ren share with each other, I love that moment, because you know there's going to be a confrontation between those two. And Finn, after witnessing all these horrors, starts to come up with a plan to get Poe Dameron out of there. And then we later cut down to the planet of Jakku, where we meet a scavenger named Rey, scouring the wreckage of this old Star Destroyer. She lives on her own, she's very self-sufficient, she doesn't really need anyone's help, but she's barely making any money to get by scavenging the parts and giving them to this guy named Uncarplot, or whatever his name is, played by Simon Pegg, which I legitimately did not know that until I saw the credits. That was insane, and since Simon Pegg is a big Star Wars fan, I love the fact that he got a role in this movie. Then we later see Rey living inside the wreckage of this AT-AT walker. Presumably, she's been there for quite a long time. We don't know exactly how long she's been there, and we don't know exactly what led to her being there in the first place. Then she discovers BB-8 nearby, and she takes him in order to protect him. And I have to say, later on, with Poe and Finn escaping from the First Order, I knew right then that Star Wars had come back, but up until then, I'm thinking, this is really good. I love the feel that they're giving off here. J.J. Abrams and his creative team correctly used the right mixture of practical and CGI effects. Obviously filmed the desert scenes out in Tunisia. Seeing the sweat on Rey's face, and later on in Finn's face when he escapes from the wreckage of the TIE fighter, you feel like you're in an actual place. It doesn't feel fake like the prequel trilogy did. And the actors' responses to it feels real, it feels authentic. And the camera work that J.J. Abrams places in here and the lighting, it all works just perfectly. It's classic Star Wars with better visual and audio equipment. Then later on, Finn figures out a way to escape by getting Poe Dameron out of containment.
We're gonna do this. Yeah?
One of the most exciting moments in this movie, when they escape in the TIE fighter and they get stuck for a second, and then everybody starts to shoot at them and they shoot back, and then when they fly out of the hangar,
I got it! Whoa, this thing really moves!
one of the things that you know that Star Wars is in good hands again. They're acting. Not in a way where it feels fake, but it feels real. If anyone's watching this, and if you're fans of the prequel trilogy, that's more than fine. That's totally fine. All I'm trying to say is that it does feel different. It feels more in line with the original 3 films. And when Finn gets his name, FN-2187, and Poe says,
Finn, I'm gonna call you Finn, is that alright? Finn. Yeah! Finn, I like that! I like that! I'm Poe Dameron. Good to meet you, Poe. Good to meet you too, Finn!
I couldn't help but went, oh my god, I love this movie! And just a little tidbit here. When Finn is given his name, watch the way the light hits his face. He's given a clean slate and a new chance at life. I noticed it right away when I first saw this, and I don't know if that was intentional, but either way, I love that little detail. Then Poe and Finn are shot down by a missile and they crash on the planet Jakku, and Poe is presumably dead because the TIE fighter sinks into the sand and blows up. Finn walks away trying to find the nearby village, and he stumbles across Rey in the village, and he discovers BB-8, who Poe mentioned earlier during their escape. So you're with the Resistance? Yes, I am with the Resistance. Yeah, I am with the Resistance. I've never met a Resistance fighter before. Well, this is what we look like. Some of us. Others look different. But then the First Order shows up. Stormtroopers and TIE fighters. So they're on their way to the ship, which gets destroyed. Wait, what about that ship? That ship's garbage!
The garbage will do!
Some people said that, like, oh, that ship's garbage. Some people knew exactly what she was saying. I didn't catch that on the first viewing. I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? And then when they show the Falcon, I went, oh! Like, the whole galaxy sees this thing as a piece of junk. That's perfect. And this leads into probably my favorite action sequence in this whole franchise. Aside from the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi, the Falcon escaping from the TIE fighters of the First Order. Oh my god, the camera work, the music, the character reactions, and seeing the little image on the radar screen that Finn's using inside the gun turret. Everything about this action sequence is so thrilling and exciting. It's just perfect. I'll admit, I have listened to that music from that scene while driving in the car on the highway, which is very dangerous. Don't even try it. Even though I have. But then later on they get sucked down onto another ship, which they presume is the First Order. But in through the door comes...
Chewie. We're home.
Speaking of which, Harrison Ford. That's one of the biggest aspects of this movie that I was really nervous about. Harrison Ford's one of my all-time favorite actors. Indiana Jones, the original Star Wars, Air Force One, recently 42 with Chadwick Boseman where he plays the owner of the Dodgers. Witness, Regarding Henry. There's so many other movies that this guy's been in. The guy's one of the greatest actors of all time, as far as I'm concerned. But with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull... Yeah, I don't really need to explain it. So leading up to this movie, I was expecting to just, putting up with his performance, even though the trailers told me otherwise. Promotions that he was doing for this movie, like the Omaze reactions that he was doing for people through their web chats and whatnot, which this is one of my favorite fan interactions that he's had, by the way.
I have to go with Padme.
Who's your favorite character?
Hi, Harrison.
Hi.
Oh my God.
I don't know what it was. You could say that, yeah, he was excited because he got a big paycheck, but he already had plenty of money before Force Awakens. I don't really think he needed that much more money. But seeing him in the interviews and him promoting the film, I don't know. But it looks like he really enjoyed working with J.J. Abrams. And J.J.'s enthusiasm, being a Star Wars fan, I can imagine that Harrison Ford saw that and said, you know what? Let's have fun with this one. Because this guy... he loves Star Wars. One of the best performances that I've ever seen from Harrison Ford, especially with what his character has to deal with Kylo Ren, which we'll talk about later. You could tell that it was Han Solo, and in a way he hasn't really changed, but at the same time, with everything that happened in between Return of the Jedi and now, you could tell that he's a lot more wiser, he's a lot more mature, and it was seeing him actually taking part in the action that was going on. I loved how Harrison Ford was not afraid to get down and dirty in the middle of the action like this, because usually you'd be very tempted to say, no, just get a stunt double. No, at least from what I could tell, he actually took part in a great deal of this stuff. It was just so pleasing to see. It was the classic Han Solo we know and love. So after they deal with two rival gangs that Han Solo owes some money to, just like Jabba, some things never change. I never made a deal with Kanja Club. Tell that to Kanja Club. And with the help of some Rathtars, which oddly remind me of the scene with Goose the Cat in Captain Marvel. If you've seen Captain Marvel, you guys will probably know what I'm talking about. They manage to take out some of the gangsters and they escape on the Falcon. Boys, you're both gonna get what I promised. Have I ever not delivered for you before? Yeah. What was the second time? Then we cut to Starkiller Base where the First Order stationed at, where General Hux and Kylo Ren are talking to a hologram of their new Emperor, Supreme Leader Snoke, played by Andy Serkis, where a certain detail is revealed about Kylo Ren.
In the hands of your father, Han Solo.
That, going into the movie, I legitimately did not know that. And when they revealed that...
What? What?
Yeah. Now that we've gotten to that point, let's talk about the characters, like the newer characters. I've talked a little bit about Han Solo, but the thing with this movie, I have to say, I was a little concerned that the newer characters were not going to be as well fleshed out or well realized. In this movie, at least, I think the characters are so well fleshed out. I understand their places in life. Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren, these three new characters, because Poe Dameron, unfortunately, I like Oscar Isaac. He's a really good actor, and I really like that character, but unfortunately, that's one of my negatives with the movie. To go off track for a second, I needed more Poe Dameron, because he's a fun addition in this new trilogy. He didn't really get that much to do, and I was kind of disappointed. That being said, the new characters, Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren, my god, these are great characters. Finn is great. Kylo Ren is amazing. He's a great villain. I know some people have some choice of words with this character, but I think he's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, if not my favorite character in this franchise. And yes, naysayers, I like Rey. Since we found out that Kylo Ren is the son of Han and Leia, at first when they revealed that he was just a guy under that mask, Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, at first I was a little bit like, what? What? A lot of people think that Kylo Ren is one of the most pathetic characters in Star Wars. I completely disagree. I think that he is one of the most complex if not the most complex character in Star Wars. Some people have said that this is basically Anakin Skywalker 2.0, but the thing is, it's done better here because Anakin Skywalker didn't really have a family dynamic. Yes, he had his mother, but then she died before he became a dark Sith Lord. And there was a bit of a weight that you felt with Obi-Wan seeing his young apprentice becoming a dark side Force user. But in this one, the impact I think feels a lot more heavier. This is Luke's nephew, Leia's son, Han's son. As we know from the sequel and from what's explained to us by Han to Rey and Finn, Luke was training a new generation of Jedi, and one of them went wrong and betrayed him. Given that Ben Solo is Luke's nephew, there's obviously a huge impact and a sense of failure that Luke feels. Not only did he fail as a Jedi, but he failed as an uncle and as a brother. I at least understand why Luke disappeared, and seeing the impact that it had on Han and Leia, seeing their own son becoming a murderer. You didn't really get that with Anakin. With this one, you feel the sense of regret and pain that they felt, and how Leia so desperately believes that her son is still good, but Han is not really sure if his son can be brought back. I would imagine that as a father, you don't want your child to be all bad. You want them to be a good person. And you see that when they're on the planet Takodana in the ruins of Maz Kanata's castle, and he sees Kylo Ren carrying away Rey onto his ship. The character of Kylo Ren has had some serious repercussions on this universe and the characters within it. And as far as Ben Solo being a wimp, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with those people, but the thing is, that's the whole point of his character. He knows that he's a wuss. He knows it, especially during that showdown that he and Rey have when they're trying to fight each other through the Force, and she says,
"You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader."
he so desperately wants to be exactly like his grandfather, but he knows that he's probably never going to be like that. We learn later on in the movie that Kylo Ren isn't fully trained, and his lightsaber being so staticky, it's a mirror of his unhinged personality. He's trying so hard to prove that he's not a wuss. When he has the mask on, he acts all tough and scary, and everybody's like, whoa, don't upset him because he's gonna rage out. He was already a big wuss, and he was just putting on a facade, and you see that it's all a facade. I actually think that makes him a very interesting and complex character. He's a guy with nothing to lose and everything to prove. And as opposed to Darth Vader, he's struggling against the light, not the dark. And you see it in that really cool scene where he's praying to Darth Vader's helmet and he goes, "Forgive me. I feel it again. The pull to the light. Show me again, grandfather, the power of the darkness." If you just take A New Hope and The Force Awakens and compare them together, Darth Vader doesn't exactly have that much depth to him. Yes, you hear of a backstory with Obi-Wan. Kylo Ren, in comparison, actually has a lot more depth, and you actually do get to know him, and you understand his place in life. And with his unhinged personality, I think in a lot of ways that makes him a lot more scarier than Darth Vader. And his connection with Rey, I think, adds a lot to this movie as well, the hero-villain dynamic, which, let's talk about Rey. Rey is probably the one thing in this movie that has gotten a lot of polarizing responses from people. A lot of people have called her a Mary Sue. In layman's terms, that's basically an all-powerful female character who's good at everything and is always on top of things. I think that in this movie, at least, Rey is probably the most interesting. I think Rey is a great character. She's not always on top of things, as we'll talk about later. Yes, she lives on a desert planet. She's longing for something better, but she doesn't have a family to go home to, just like Luke did in the original. And I think that her desire for something better is obviously a classic Star Wars element. You have that unlikely hero that doesn't really come from anything, but there is something special about them and they're destined for greatness. Yes, you could say that it's something that we've seen before, but that story has been told countless times. Not just in the original trilogy, but in other forms of fiction. Superheroes, mythologies. From Joseph Campbell's story that George Lucas took a lot of inspiration from. Rey is just an updated version of that story, of that protagonist. And also another thing that I think really works about her, and that I think makes her a really interesting character, is that her backstory is a mystery. We don't know exactly what's so interesting about her. And I think that the questions surrounding Rey, and you could argue whether or not it was blown out of proportion as to who she's related to, but they make her origins this big mystery to the point of like, okay, who's her family? And J.J. Abrams, I think, put a lot of stuff in here that makes you go, something's going on here. Like from the moment that we meet her and when she meets BB-8, it's like, where do you come from? Classified, really? Me too, big secret. Right off the bat, you know that, okay, something special about her. It's like, I'm waiting for my family and they'll be back one day. Or at least she believes that they'll be back one day. And then later on, when they're at Maz Kanata's castle and after she has that talk with Finn and she hears this voice saying, "No, come back, come back." And she goes downstairs into the basement and opens this box. and sees the lightsaber inside. She touches it, and she has that force vision, where she sees a silhouette of Luke Skywalker touching R2-D2, and all this other stuff from the Knights of Ren, her as a little girl yelling up at the ship, "No, come back, come back!" Can I just say that scene alone, if you really listen closely to all the audio and seeing all the imagery from like when you go into that hallway, you can actually hear Luke going, "No, no!" And you can actually hear Yoda's voice too. So much of Star Wars stuff is thrown in there, incorporating all those elements together. I think it's a great scene, and it's like, what's going on here?
Red?
Both Obi-Wan actors meshed into one. That's just perfect. And then after that, when Maz Kanata shows up,
that lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you.
Now, I say all of this with this in mind that by the time Rise of Skywalker comes out, I could be completely wrong. The way that Maz Kanata said that line, and with all this other stuff, like with these little looks that Han gives her, and when Maz asks Han, "Who's the girl?" And then it cuts, and the next time you see Maz Kanata, she's all excited. There's something special about this girl, Rey. What is it? And her saying that line, the lightsaber was Luke's and his father's, now it's calling to you. Immediately, when I first saw this, I went, oh! So she's related to Luke. His daughter, his niece, I don't know. Maybe it's a clone, I think that's a bit of a stretch. Yes, I know they've done cloning before, okay? I know that. But the way that scene plays out, I can't help but go that, okay, she's definitely in some way closely related to the lineage of Luke Skywalker, at least until The Last Jedi put the kibosh on that, but we'll save that for later, okay? And I know what some of you out there are gonna say, Joe, they confirmed that she was a nobody because Maz Kanata said, whomever you're waiting for, they're not coming back. She's a nobody. They proved it already. We'll see what happens with Rise of Skywalker, but that does not prove that she's a nobody. That could mean a whole bunch of different things. She probably meant it as like, you're not gonna find the answers in your past. The only way to find your parents or find the answers is to move forward. Go out and find the answers yourself. You don't know the full picture any more than I do at this point. Once Rise of Skywalker comes out, we'll know for sure. All I'm saying was that there was a clear intention here to make Rey somebody special and related to someone important. Maz provides some words of wisdom to Rey, saying that the belonging you seek is not behind you, it is ahead. I am no Jedi, but I know the Force. She encourages Rey to take the lightsaber, but she refuses to and storms out of the building. That, I think, is a perfect summation of what makes Rey so interesting. Is like she wants that sense of belonging. If she goes out and tries to find them, then maybe she can find that sense of belonging that she wants. Daisy Ridley, I have to say, is a revelation. She sells every emotional beat that's in here. And I'm glad that they picked an obscure actress from nowhere. Had it been someone somewhat known, I don't think it would have worked as well. But in this situation, I thought it worked perfectly. Which brings us into Finn. For a while, you think that he's the protagonist of this movie. And if you go back and watch the trailers, it makes you think that he's going to be the Jedi, but then when you see the movie, that's not the case. It's a fake out, because when you see him handle the lightsaber against that one stormtrooper, the one who we all know launched 1,000 memes and parodies on the internet, he's clearly had no practice with a lightsaber, and he's not been once shown to be force sensitive. As a character, this was the first time we ever saw under the helmet of a stormtrooper a classic Star Wars element. And I loved how J.J. Abrams humanized that element of Star Wars. He's not that kind of character who traditionally defects from the bad side to the good side of the fight. He just wants to get away from the First Order, as he says in that scene with Rey. And then when later Rey is captured by Kylo Ren, he has a reason to come back to the fight, and he's not really interested in the greater good or the cause. And Han asks him, how do you know how to disable the shields? I don't. I'm just here to get Rey. And John Boyega, I had seen the guy in an episode of 24, and I know he was in a movie called Attack the Block, which I haven't seen. I think John Boyega is so great in this movie. Very energetic, and you could tell that he was really excited to be in Star Wars, but not in the way where it's distracting. It's like, oh my god, yeah, he's excited to be in Star Wars, I get it, but could you tone it down a bit, man? But no, you actually feel for this character and his situation and his predicament. And the scene where he sees Rey being carried away and he yells out after her, oh my god, it literally rips my heart out. Oh man. Now, since I mentioned Finn and humanizing a stormtrooper, you all know that this movie has been criticized by many as being just a rehash or a remake of A New Hope. I'm gonna put a link to a video of Chris Stuckman's video analyzing the Star Wars formula, because he said just about everything that needs to be said. My whole take on it is that as I saw the movie, yeah, I recognize that there were some similar plot points, but I don't think it's a rehash. It is not a remake, people.
Yes, it is, Joe.
No, it's not.
There's a droid with important information, and they have to blow up a big moon-shaped ship at the end of the movie. And the wise old man dies at the climax of the movie.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Yes, there are similar plot points, but the thing is, after the original trilogy and when we all experienced the prequel trilogy, I know that they have their fans, and that's cool, but a lot of Star Wars fans were not pleased with those three films. A lot of them felt that it didn't feel like Star Wars and that it lost the adventure. So they were like, I wish they were more like the originals. And what do you know? This movie comes in and it feels a lot in many ways like the originals, but I think that they do stick to the formula of Star Wars, but they do different things with it, as I've explained before.
What are you talking about? They don't do anything new with the formula.
Another word out of you and I'll throw you out the bloody window.
Knock it off and let me finish. So unfortunately, The Force Awakens has a really difficult task of winning back a very disenfranchised and fractured fan base. It's trying to win back the trust of the Star Wars fans. I'm not a huge fan of the prequels either, but The Force Awakens is obviously a million times better than the prequel trilogy. The acting, the storytelling, I think is far superior. Miles and miles better than what we saw in those three movies. But it's not the same story. This movie is not about Starkiller Base. It's about finding Luke Skywalker. The original movie, from the very opening of the movie, the Death Star is the main focus. Poe Dameron is not a prince, as far as we know, but I highly doubt it. Han Solo is nothing like Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is not a Jedi. He's playing Han Solo. And the thing is, Obi-Wan in the original taught Luke everything. Han does not teach Rey anything, and different things are happening in the scenes. Darth Vader does not have that much emotional depth to him as a character in A New Hope, as opposed to Kylo Ren, like I said earlier. There's no stormtrooper helping out Luke and Obi-Wan in the original movie either. And the Starkiller Base, yes, is a threat to the Resistance. It's a familiar backdrop that's used in order to let us feel the emotions of the characters. Do you recall something like that happening in A New Hope at the climax of the movie? If you say yes, that is a bold-faced lie. Don't even try it. And also the cantina scene, I heard some people at the time say, oh, there's a place with weird creatures in it, it's the same movie. Do you not want Star Wars stuff in your movie? What do you want from this thing?
What do you want?
They pull it down to the shallowest points. It's so ridiculous. And there's a cantina scene in Episode 2 Attack of the Clones where they try to find that assassin Zamwazell. Were people complaining back then? If they weren't, then I really have to question their judgment. And Han Solo dying is nothing like the Ben Kenobi death. I mean, the main antagonist kills him, yes, but to me, that's the only similarity. I wasn't watching the movie thinking, oh my god, the older, wiser guy died, it's the same movie. Different things are happening in the scenes, pal. It's not the same movie. And the original Star Wars is not a new story, guys. It wasn't. It was drawn from things like Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, and all the fantastical mythological stories from fantasy, good versus evil, Lord of the Rings. George Lucas took so many different elements and mixed them all together into that story of A New Hope, and took a lot of ideas from historical events like the Nazis, World War II, and Hitler and stormtroopers. It's not the same movie. And if you think that it is, well, you're entitled to that opinion, but don't try to argue with me that it is. I've given plenty of reasons as to why I don't think it's the same movie as A New Hope. Enough said, let's move on before I get carried away. So after Rey is captured, Finn, Han, and Chewie go to the Resistance base with General Leia Organa, which, by the way, I was really happy to see Leia come back, and I was a little worried about Carrie Fisher, but just like with Harrison Ford, it feels just right. So they come up with a plan to sneak onto Starkiller Base, and they fly on the Falcon and get to Starkiller Base to rescue Rey, who's just managed to escape captivity, using the Jedi mind trick on the Stormtrooper, voiced by Daniel Craig, by the way, which is really cool. Daniel, drop your weapon, and I'll drop my weapon. So great. And the best part. And I have to say, the emotional beats, like the tones, it feels like a nice combination of humor, darkness, and light. I don't recall a movie where I've hit every single emotion that I could think of. In a Star Wars movie especially. So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first? It's really hard to understand you with all the apparatus. And Harrison Ford has the classic Han Solo humor. Listen, big deal. You got another big problem. Women always figure out the truth. Always.
We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works. Oh, really? You're cold?
To me, it feels very organic. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel out of place. It feels like a natural flow of different tones, all meshed into one. The direction from J.J. Abrams and the writing from him and Lawrence Kasdan, it feels just exactly right. Speaking of emotional stuff, Han Solo ends up dying. I wish that I did not know about that before I saw this movie. I wish that it had not been spoiled for me. But regardless, it was still a great moment, and there's so much happening in that scene. And I love the lighting on Ben Solo's face because one side of it's red, the other is blue. You can tell that he's conflicted about what he's supposed to do. He knows in order to get closer to the darkness, he has to kill his father. And then when he stabs Han and Chewie roar and Rey screaming, "No!" And Han touching Ben's face right before he falls. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. And I think that was a really brave move for them to kill off Han Solo because, as you know, Harrison Ford has said that he wished that Han Solo died in Return of the Jedi in order to give it a much more emotional weight to the story. Han Solo didn't really have that much emotional ties with other people in the originals, and yeah, I wouldn't disagree with him. At the same time, I'm glad that they didn't kill him off then because we got to see him come back again. And also, this movie adds another layer of emotion to him with his son Kylo Ren and how he failed as a father, and his sacrifice is his redemption. And I think that it paid off so well. I don't know how else to put it. Kylo Ren later confronts Rey and Finn in the forest, and then a lightsaber fight ensues between Finn and Kylo. And Finn gets effed up pretty badly, big time. But then when he tries to grab Luke's lightsaber, Rey catches it. And then a big fight ensues. And another thing about Rey is that when people say that she's always on top of things, well, if you notice at a certain point throughout this fight, she starts to run away. After Kylo Ren gets a few good hits in, she realizes, whoa, this guy is a lot more experienced than I am. I don't stand a chance. So she tries to run away. If she was very overpowered and very confident, she wouldn't have ran away like that. And she tried to run away when she saw Kylo Ren on Takodana. Plus, when she tried to open the door in the space station that Han and Chewie were on, she accidentally lets out the Wrath Tars. Right there, she made a mistake. And she didn't exactly have an easy time piloting the Falcon as the TIE fighters were coming after her, because she says not so easy without a co-pilot. And when Finn says they need cover.
We need cover, quick!
We're about to get some!
She has a sense of vulnerability to her. She wouldn't have gotten captured by Kylo Ren if that wasn't the case. She's nearly pushed over the edge. You need a teacher! I can show you the ways of the Force! The Force. Then she stops, calms her mind down, and remembers what Maz Kanata told her about the Force. And then she gets the upper hand on Kylo Ren, and bruises him up pretty badly. All the while, the Resistance manages to get inside the reactor core, and they destroy the core, and therefore Starkiller Base starts to blow up. First Order manages to escape, and Supreme Leader Snoke says, "Bring Kylo Ren to me. It is time to complete his training." So Rey, along with Finn and Chewie, they manage to escape the planet, and along with the Resistance, as Starkiller Base blows up, then R2-D2, as at the Resistance base, wakes up and says, "Oh, hey, I got the map." "Oh, you couldn't have done that earlier?" So they find the map, and Leia sends Rey to go find Luke while Finn lays in the hospital bay, and she finds Luke Skywalker there. And the fact that J.J. Abrams made us wait until the very last minute to see Luke Skywalker, that was a brave decision, and obviously no words spoken. Mark Hamill's acting, the way he's able to convey that emotion when he sees Rey, wow. And how it ends on a cliffhanger. And at the time, it made me go, I want to know. I want to know more. What's going to happen? What's he going to say about the lightsaber? And real quick, now I know some people had a problem with Supreme Leader Snoke at the time, with his look. I was alright with it, I guess. I mean, at first I thought, oh my god, is he a 25-foot tall villain? I don't want to see that. Then it turns out he was a hologram, and then we saw in The Last Jedi he was more like a normal-sized kind of guy. Maz Kanata, I think she's a really fascinating character, and some people said that they wanted like an actual person, like a practical animatronic or a puppet. I understand what they're saying, but it doesn't look bad to me. Sometimes you could tell, yeah, it looks a little obvious, and it was a motion capture effect, and Lupita Nyong'o, I think, did a really good job. The point with Maz Kanata is her eyes. You wouldn't have gotten those facial subtleties just like you did with the CGI motion capture effect. So I was okay with it. CGI doesn't always work, but practical effects don't always work either. You want to shoot me for that? Go right ahead. If there's any complaints I had, I was alright with Starkiller Base, but I don't think it really needed to be there. Yes, it was another Death Star, but there wasn't so much emphasis on it, so I was okay with it. Captain Phasma, she basically did nothing in here. Yes, I like the idea of a female stormtrooper, and she has a cool look, but she was basically Boba Fett in this new trilogy. What more do you want from her? Poe Dameron, like I said, I think that we could have used more of him, and it was cool to see him come back in his reunion with Finn. But how he managed to get away, it was like, hey, look, it's not important. He managed to get away, and that's all that matters. Alright. Well, he's a cool character. I don't really care how he survived. And with Luke's lightsaber, I do wish they cleared that up, because the last time we saw it was when Luke and Vader were fighting each other in Cloud City, so where the hell did that thing go? And how did it end up in Maz Kanata's hands? And basically the reaction was, who cares, it's here, just go with it. Yeah, it kind of bugs me, but when I think about it, Yeah, how interesting could that story have actually been? Oh, and I don't like General Hux either. I got nothing against the actor Domhnall Gleeson, but he looked really uncomfortable in the role. I think he overdid it a little bit, especially in that scene where he gives that speech, "The last day of the Republic!" And it was an obvious, reference to the Nazi military rallies in the pre-World War II era when Hitler would give all those fiery, passionate speeches and whatnot. The First Order and the Empire, they are the Nazis. I mean, so it's not really a surprise, but I think Domhnall Gleeson overacted a little bit. Overall, I think Star Wars The Force Awakens is a solid Star Wars adventure and one of the best films in the franchise. And dare I say it, I think it's right up there with the original trilogy. It's quality storytelling, and J.J. Abrams and company nailed it. They nailed it, and I loved how they executed it, and I loved how it got Star Wars back in the right direction. And I don't care what anybody says, I will defend this movie to my grave. So those are my thoughts on Star Wars The Force Awakens. What are your thoughts on the film? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts. Respectfully, please. Stay tuned for my review of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, and I will see you all very soon.